The modern art phenomenon.
Our next topic is arts, entitled Modern Art Phenomenon.
Summary of topics. The topic is all about the difference of Expressionism, Impressionism and Cubism, the famous artists from different art movements and their characteristics. Impressionism described as an art style that tried to capture an impression of what the eye sees at a given moment and the effect of sunlight on the subject. Expressionism. This style sacrificed too much by trying to capture the momentary effects of the sunlight on forms and colors, while Cubism is also called a collage, where the cubist explored the idea of sticking down paper to make a special kind of picture. Objectives. At the end of the activity, the learner should be able to 1. Analyze art element and principles in the production of work following a specific art style from the various art movement. 2. Identify distinct characteristics of arts from various art movement. 3. Compare the characteristics of artworks produced in various art movement. Subject matter. 1. The modern art phenomenon. 2. Impressionism. A. Characteristics. B. Well-known impressionist. 3. Expressionism. 4. Cubism.
Impressionism is a 19th-century art movement that originated with a group of Paris-based artists whose independent exhibitions brought them to prominence during the 1870s and 1880s. Impressionist painting characteristics include relatively small, thin, yet visible brush strokes, open composition, emphasis on accurate depiction of light and its changing qualities, often accentuating the effects of the passage of time, ordinary subject matter, inclusion of movement as a crucial element of human perception and experience, and unusual visual angles. The Impressionists faced harsh opposition from the conventional art community in France. The name of the style derives from the title of a Claude Monet work, Impression, Soleil Levant, Impression, Sunrise, which provoked the critic Louis Leroy to coin the term in a satirical review published in the Parisian newspaper Le Charivari. The development of Impressionism in the visual arts was soon followed by analogous styles in other media that became known as Impressionist music and Impressionist literature. Radicals and their time, early Impressionists violated the rules of academic painting. They constructed their pictures from freely brushed colors that took precedence over lines and contours, following the example of painters such as Eugen Delacroix and J.M.W. Turner. They also painted realistic scenes of modern life, and often painted outdoors. Previously, still lifes and portraits as well as landscapes were usually painted in a studio. The Impressionists found that they could capture the momentary and transient effects of sunlight by painting en plein air. They portrayed overall visual effects instead of details, and used short broken brush strokes of mixed and pure unmixed color, not blended smoothly or shaded, as was customary, to achieve an effect of intense color vibration. Impressionism emerged in France at the same time that a number of other painters, including the Italian artists known as the Macchiaioli, and Winslow Homer in the United States, were also exploring plein-air painting. The Impressionists, however, developed new techniques specific to the style, encompassing what its adherents argued was a different way of seeing. It is an art of immediacy and movement, of canzy poses and compositions, of the play of light expressed in a bright and varied use of color. The public, at first hostile, gradually came to believe that the Impressionists had captured a fresh and original vision, even if the art critics and art establishment disapproved of the new style. By recreating the sensation in the eye that views the subject, rather than delineating the details of the subject, and by creating a welter of techniques and forms, Impressionism is a precursor of various painting styles, including Neo-Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, Fauvism, and Cubism.
There were several areas in which Impressionist artists moved away from the established practices of art at that time. These involved their use of color, choice of subject matter and setting, and technique for capturing light and conveying movement. What are the distinct characteristics of Impressionism? Color and light, ordinary or they call it everyday subjects, painting outdoors, open composition, the influence of photography. What is color and light? The painting conventions and techniques of earlier art periods were very much concerned with line, form, and composition. In contrast, the Impressionists painted with freely brushed colors that can be more of a visual effect than a detailed rendering of the subject. They used short broken strokes that were intentionally made visible to the viewer. They also often placed pure and mixed colors side by side, rather than blended smoothly or shaded. The Impressionists capture ordinary subjects, engage in day-to-day activities in both rural and urban settings. Impressionist artists relax the boundary between subject and background so that the effect of an Impressionist painting often resembles a snapshot, a part of a larger reality capture as if by chance. They ventured into capturing scenes of life around them, household objects, landscapes and seascapes, houses, cafes, and buildings. They presented ordinary people seemingly caught off guard, doing everyday tasks, at work or at leisure, or doing nothing at all. And they were not made to look beautiful or lifelike, as body parts could be distorted and facial features merely suggested by a few strokes of the brush. The location in which the Impressionists painted was also different. Previously, still lifes, portraits, and landscapes were usually painted inside a studio. However, the Impressionists found that they could best capture the ever-changing effects of light on color by painting outdoors in natural light. This gave their works a freshness and immediacy that was quite a change from stiffer, heavier, more blunt paintings of earlier masters. Impressionist painting also moved away from the formal, structured approach to placing and positioning their subjects. They experimented with unusual visual angles, sizes of objects that appeared out of proportion, off-center placement, and empty spaces on the canvas. Photography was in its early stages at that time. As it gained popularity, photography inspired Impressionists to capture fleeting moments of action, whether in landscapes or in the day-to-day lives of people. But whereas camera snapshots provide objective, true-to-life images, the artists were able to offer a subjective view of their subjects, expressing their personal perceptions rather than creating exact representations. They also had the advantage of manipulating color, which photography at that time still lacked. In its day, Impressionism was considered a radical departure from tradition. Looking back, we can see that Impressionism was more than a departure. It changed the very nature of the way people think about art today. Thanks to all the very Impressionists for striving to push forward in what they believed in, we would not have this very fine art style we call Impressionism today.
The term Expressionism became commonly used in Germany around 1910 to describe avant-garde art of the time. Expressionist art grew out of the work of symbolist artists such as Paul Gauguin, Edvard Munch and Vincent van Gogh. Feelings were emphasised above all else. Expression over impression. Expressionism over Impressionism. Artists associated with Expressionism emerged in centres across Germany and Austria. In Dresden, a group of artists called themselves Die Brücke, or the Bridge, seeing their art as the bridge into the future as they freed themselves of the constraints of tradition. Ernst Ludwig Kirchner was a key member of the Bridge. This early painting by him is highly decorative as well as expressive. The bold use of colour and exaggerated form express the exotic qualities of the subject. A Japanese theatre group performing in Dresden. Something new and exotic, escaping from tradition. Emil Nolde, a member of the Bridge for a short while, was a frequent visitor to the Ethnographic Museum in Berlin. This painting looks forward to his trip in 1914 to the South Pacific. The heavy brushstrokes, shadowy figure and use of deep red gives the viewer a sense of foreboding. Like Kirchner, Nolde was interested in trying to escape traditional artistic forms and in drawing inspiration from non-Western culture. Another expressionist group developed in Munich at the same time as the Bridge. This group, called Der Blaue Reiter, or the Blue Rider, took its name from a painting by Wassily Kandinsky. The art of the group emphasised the spiritual over the earthbound. After the First World War, a new wave of artists came to prominence, rejecting the outpouring of emotions of expressionist art and turned to a matter-of-fact depiction of the world. The new movement was known as New Objectivity. George Grosz, who was associated with New Objectivity, claimed it revealed to the oppressed the true faces of their oppressors: ugly, corrupt. In time, though, expressionists and realists who did confront the brutality of the modern industrialised world would find themselves victims of it. Weimar Germany embraced avant-garde cinema, art, architecture and theatre, but this came to an abrupt end in 1933, when Hitler's Nazi Party came to power. The Nazis labelled modern art degenerate art. Expressionists and other avant-garde art, like New Objectivity, was censored for not upholding what they saw as German values. Once classified as degenerate, many artists went into exile abroad. Kirchner killed himself. Expressionists continued, though, in a fragmented way, to create emotive work. Their influence survived in later art movements like abstract expressionism and neo-expressionism. After the Second World War, Expressionism was rediscovered and reclaimed in Germany as part of its true heritage. In the 1970s and 1980s in Germany, several artists looked back at the Expressionist forerunners and were themselves dubbed neo-expressionists. Georg Baselitz was one such artist. Censorship and persecution couldn't stop the influence of these avant-garde artists. But if art is born from the human spirit, should we really be surprised?
Imagine walking into a large room where an artist is standing on top of a canvas, meticulously splattering paint. Upon questioning the artist as to what his goal is, he claims the painting has a mind of its own and will tell him when it's complete. He responds, "Something in me knows where I'm going." This artist is Jackson Pollock. Known best for his incredibly large canvases filled with seemingly random paint splatters, Pollock was one of the leading artists of the abstract movement.
I know what you're thinking. Anyone can throw paint onto a canvas. Why is he a leading artist? Well, it gets a bit more difficult than just the process.
The art theory and movement behind this way of thinking is called Expressionism. Expressionism as a theory asserts that artists are inspired by emotional experiences and shows these emotions in their work to share with their viewers. It was born from the ideas of the 19th century Romanticist movement, where strong emotions emphasize imagination, feeling, and intuition. To help let that lengthy definition settle, let's discuss Max Beckman. Max Beckman was a German artist painting during the time of World War II. While many label him as an expressionist, he actually refused to call himself one. He became a part of the New Objectivity movement, which challenged Expressionism's abstraction with unsentimental reality and a focus on the objective world. However, many of his ideas about the self fall within the Expressionist realm. Beckman, much like Rembrandt, is well known for his self-portraits. He's been quoted saying, "One of my problems is to find the self." And so he searched, painting many self-portraits along the way. Many self-portraits. Beckman loved to paint himself. Here he is in a fancy tux. He's in a very nice blue jacket here. Now he's a nurse. Oh, he's got a horn in this one. And here he is in Florence. And here, sporting a lovely red scarf. But hold on. We can all tell that each of these portraits are of Beckman, but why does he look so different in each one? He looks so poised here in Florence, yet so pale and sickly with his red scarf. The way Beckman painted his self-portraits epitomizes the idea of Expressionism. When Beckman would paint a self-portrait, he didn't just paint what he saw, he painted how he felt, what he thought he looked like on the inside. Expressionism as a theory dates back to 1897, when Leo Tolstoy, of the War and Peace fame, wrote What is Art? At first, Expressionists were only concerned with two terms, the artist and the artwork. Tolstoy added a third term, the viewer. Art is a human activity consisting in this, that one man consciously, by means of certain external signs, hands on to others feelings he has lived through, and that other people are infected by these feelings and also experience them.
In layman's terms,
the artist creates something, whether painting, sculpture, literature, or music, based on feelings he or she had been living through, and successfully sharing these feelings with his or her viewer allows them to share in the experience. The purpose of art is not to make us smarter, but more humane.
so what's so great about Expressionism? Why is this even a theory?
Expressionism gives art a place in the Western culture, asserting that art is beneficial. It allows art to reach out to everyone as it appeals to emotion rather than physical objects.
Sounds awesome, right? Why hasn't this answered once and for all what art is?
Much like all of the other theories attempting to answer that age-old question, what is art? Expressionism has its downfalls. According to Tolstoy's version of Expressionism, if the artist wasn't feeling the specific feeling being evoked by the viewer, it's not art. Horror films cause strong emotions, but should it be considered a higher work of art over other pieces like Shakespeare?
So, why is it that Pollock, mentioned earlier, is considered art? Well, let's hear it from the man himself.
The modern artist is living in a mechanical age, and we have a mechanical means of representing objects in nature, such as the camera and photograph. The modern artist, it seems to me, is working and expressing an inner world, in other words, expressing the energy, the motion, and other inner forces. With the invention of cameras, art is no longer needed to document history, allowing for the artist to paint however they feel. Pollock epitomizes this idea. It's not about the technique or skill, it's about the expression, which, according to expressionists, makes his piece a work of art.
Cubism is often credited as being one of the most avant-garde, groundbreaking and revolutionary art movements. But what exactly is Cubist art, and who were the Cubists? The two most pivotal artists referred to as the inventors of Cubism are France's Georges Braque and Spain's Pablo Picasso. Back in the early 1900s, these two pioneers started to represent and depict their subject matter from multiple angles and viewpoints at the same time rather than from a single fixed position, which had been the norm prior to that. Despite the name of the iconic movement, neither Braque or Picasso ever painted cubes. The term itself actually originated from a derogatory remark made by an art critic in 1908. The critic had disparaged Braque by saying the artist reduced everything to geometric schemas, to cubes. The term soon became widespread. Cubism was born. Cubist techniques were evident throughout all of Picasso's work at this time. Tête, for instance, is one of his most celebrated artworks and the most abstract of all of his Cubist collages. The half circle drawn in charcoal depicts the profile of a head. The small circle and diagonal line with the arc represent an eye and nose. The pasted-on elements represent the face, hair and neck. Within a few years, both Braque and Picasso began to incorporate letters into their Cubist works. Braque's Le Bougeoir, meaning the candlestick, from 1911, is a very early example of one of his paintings to include lettering. The purpose of this lettering was to question the relationship between words, pictures, and the objects they represent. Towards the top of the painting is a candle, which helps to identify the shape below as a candlestick. A simple clay pipe, the kind Braque smoked, lies to the centre right, and below that are a bobbin and a pair of scissors. Within a few years, a small group of artists based in Paris, including Fernand Léger, Robert Delaunay and Sonia Delaunay, were following the lead of Braque and Picasso's abstract art. They wanted to emphasise the point that a painting is a flat surface, while the things they represented were three-dimensional. So instead of choosing a fixed perspective and presenting views as if seen through a window, they painted motifs as if seen from several different angles at once. The Cubist style quickly spread across Europe and America, with particular popularity burgeoning in Russia, where the style corresponded and chimed with newly forming revolutionary ideals. In Scotland, the work of artists like William Crozet also displayed a strong affinity with Cubism, as can be seen in this painting of Edinburgh from the late 1920s. Cubism soon splintered and morphed into various different styles across numerous different countries. The Italians had Futurism, the British had Vorticism, the Russians had Suprematism and Constructivism. It also inspired and influenced movements around the world in different creative disciplines, such as architecture, music and literature. Given the far-reaching impact of the movement and its many exciting and important offshoots, the case can easily be made for Cubism as being the most radical and influential art movement of the 20th century. The Cubists constructed new realities, moving away from traditional ideas of representation, leading to abstraction.
Modern art's phenomenon includes the artistic work produced during the period extending roughly from 1860s and 1970s, modern artists experimental with new ways of seeing with the fresh ideas about the nature of materials and functions of arts.
Assess and learn. Impressionism and Expressionism. Completing a graphic organizer, fill out the Venn diagram to show the similarities and difference between Expressionism and Impressionism. Create your own Venn diagram to your notebook.
So I hope you guys learned a lot from our lesson for today. See you on our next discussion.